What's going on, everybody? My name is Tenebris Infinite, and welcome back to episode 3 of Building the Berserker. So, in between the last episode and this one, I've done a ton of testing, my dudes. I've tested what about the stamina system feels so off to me here trying to make a full melee build. And also, I've tested out Harvester Hunter farming and some efficient methods that we can utilize in order to make it more viable here in Generation Zero, especially for an early game melee build. Now, we'll discuss the stamina thing while I'm going off and doing a bit of farming later on. But for now, let's talk about some of the kind of tips and tricks that I found for farming up Harvester's Hunters using only melee. So, a number of big things that are some takeaways that I've had so far in my testing is flare placement, controlling kind of where the enemies are moving to and what target they're focusing on based on where you have your flare placed in terms of proximity to the machines. A lot of times you'll be tempted to just yeet the flare as far as you can, but sometimes that's not actually the best choice because you'll be actually focusing the machines that are closer to you on you, well, where you're kind of throwing the flare to a point where it's not going to be as usable. So you'll see here that I actually throw the flare to the ground, and if I had cleared myself out of the area soon enough, I would have been a-okay. And that's one of the different kind of ways that you can utilize flares, is not just throwing it off as far as you can, but actually placing it where you were previously at in order to kind of keep the machines focused on that location so you can keep track of them and make sure that you're limiting the amount of damage you're taking. The other thing too is that EMPs seem to have a little bit of a maybe cooldown effect or something like that, where sometimes if you plant the EMP like even directly onto the machine right after you've EMP'd it, it will not have any sort of effect. So kind of using your EMPs a little bit more sparingly in your fight can be incredibly beneficial. And then the last thing too, and this kind of goes counterintuitive to the guerrilla tips and tricks that I put out a couple weeks back, but it's actually just focusing your damage on one particular machine. And the point of this is that your DPS with melee weapons is actually really, really low in comparison to the other guns of the game. And so, keeping that in mind, in order to effectively take down machines, you want to make sure that your damage is kind of focused on the particular machine that you want to destroy, instead of gradually weakening the entire bunch and then taking them all out smoothly. So basically, in order to get this melee build to survive, we're going to have to use as many utility items as we possibly can, just to deal with those scenarios where you have absolutely no choice but to use some sort of a ranged option. But throughout this entire playthrough, I'm going to be making sure that I never use a single gun to earn a single point of experience. And that's going to be kind of the overall concept of this melee build, is that you can use things like grenades, EMPs, flares, but when it comes down to your primary and secondary slots, the only thing you can use is some sort of melee weapon. Now, from all of that testing, I also managed to earn a slick experience point, so let's spend that up now. So now let's talk a little bit about what I've been testing in terms of stamina here in Generation Zero before we get into a proper full-on montage. So basically, the thing that I've come to is that the cooldown timer that's been put into the stamina system is the thing that makes it feel really clunky and unintuitive. So basically, there's this cooldown in the game now, and having to wait out that cooldown for utilizing your melee attacks can lead to you basically just being forced to never really getting the full damage potential out of your melee weapon. And this is a big problem in a lot of ways. So the kind of counterpart to this stamina system is that you regain stamina faster when you are standing absolutely still. And that really doesn't work when you're in the middle of combat. That works great when you're running around and stuff, because it's like, oh, okay, I need to catch my breath for immersion purpose or something like that. But when it comes to combat, it's really, really unintuitive to the way combat works here in Generation Zero. And I guess the thing is that you don't really notice it when you're using guns, because you're fighting from such a distance, and a lot of times when you're picking shots and stuff like that, outside of the moments of run and gun, you're going to be kind of standing still and regaining your stamina anyway, or at least moving slowly so that you're regaining your stamina. You won't be sprinting around and shooting at the exact same time. But when it comes to melee, you're going to be sprinting in order to close your distance, and by the time you've sprinted up to the enemy, your stamina's completely worn out, and then you have to wait for that cooldown. But at the same time, you also have to start hitting the enemy, so it's just all very counterintuitive, and isn't really a high priority problem, because, you know, most people aren't going to be making a full melee build, and they'll just be keeping melee weapons for the situations where the machines are really up close to them. But in terms of Generation Zero as a sandbox, I think maybe if there's a developer out there listening to this, potentially, that this could be revised a little bit just to benefit melee play, and maybe make the stamina system a little bit more generous than what it currently is right now. So that maybe wasn't the most successful farming session of all time when it comes to harvester hunter farming, but we did at least earn a single level out of it. So let's spend that up here real quick. So there we go, my dudes. Our first session of quote-unquote successful harvester hunter farming. I think that if the tanks hadn't have shown up too, then the farming would have been much smoother. So we're gonna have to try to find scenarios where we can isolate a harvester for our farming. That's usually how I do things with my engineer build and with other builds that I've made in the game. But with the melee build, it's a lot harder to isolate enemies. So we're gonna have to figure out some funky tricks in order to make that happen. But I think we're going to wrap up the episode here. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this one. There was a lot more testing that has kind of gone into this video than the last two. So hopefully there was some valuable information for you dudes to take away, especially if any of you dudes are attempting to make your own melee build. If you are, maybe let me know in the comments down below. And if you've been enjoying the series so far, hit that thumbs up button. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then, peace out, my dudes.